Good morning and welcome to Better Thyself segment of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. We are aware that we have to work and work in certain environment where we may not be sure of what's happening. And not only that, even in our social discourse, we find and come across people whom we don't like. You can pick up your friends, but you can't usually pick your coworkers. Chances are that you will work with someone you don't like, someone you don't can't stand. Then how do you effectively work with such a person? Quite possible there may be someone you right now whom you can't stand. Now here's a comment by Mr. Singh Jaspal. He says, someone you can't stand, is this an inbuilt process or derived over a long period? Well, it can be both. You meet a person and immediately you receive negative vibes, and you cannot tolerate that person. You cannot even stand the sound of that person talking, the sight of that person moving. It's an anathema for you. Or he might have been a long friend. Slowly, the relationship degenerated, and you no longer like him. Rather, you despise a person. You can't tolerate. It can be because of the personality, it can be because of the attitude, habits, or anything. But the possibility is always is instinctive, but it is built over a long time. A series of actions can result in that. Or just you meet someone and you say, what? This person is not fit to be talked to. So, Mr. Singh Jaspal, it can be both. It can be an inbuilt process, or it can be derived over a long period. But then, whatever the cause, the net result is that you cannot stand that person. So, how do you work with such a person? You see, when you're working remotely, as you're working nowadays from home, the limits of amount of interaction you have to have with a person. Even in such a situation where you're not sitting across a person, it can limit information and make the situation worse. As a matter of fact, it's much more difficult to work with a person you can't stand when you're collaborating virtually rather than in real time. When you're working virtually, you can always turn off your camera so you don't have to look at them. But working remotely also takes arrows out of your quiver. You cannot pick up your body language and you cannot see his body language. And thereby you could miss subtle cues that could be helpful. The intonation of the voice, the facial expressions. And when a person is such with whom you are at cross purposes, with whom you cannot work, you are working with such a person naturally. When you cannot see the person's movement, the gestures, the uplifting the eyebrow, the twinkle in the eye, the sarcasm that may not be in the language but in the intonation, then working becomes much more difficult. You are much more vulnerable to misunderstanding, and that can further deepen your negative feelings. Like it or not, your job and your reputation rely on an ability to get along with others. It may not be a team effort, but then if you are not on good terms with your colleagues, whether you like them or you don't. Your reputation is at stake. So, how to make such a situation tolerable, bearable, workable? This is $1 million question that all of us face. And many times the situation degenerates to the extent that you want to move away from the problem. So, how to work effectively, efficiently? It is difficult, but not impossible. I would suggest that the first thing is you recognize that it's a problem. If you say that you don't mind, you can always disassociate your personality and personal feelings don't count. You are cheating yourself, you are deceiving yourself. Don't forget that if you don't like someone, it's not that person's problem, it's your problem. If you find someone distasteful in some way, it's because the judgments you are making and the reactions you are having. And that's important. You have to own that these are your feelings. And the foundation of effective working begins with recognition of personal responsibility. I'm not saying that you must not dislike a person, definitely dislike, but recognize that you dislike. Once you recognize, then it's easier to tolerate because okay, then that's a burden which is a necessary burden, is a necessary evil. But if you don't recognize, then it's a real burden which you cannot tolerate. And then don't forget, dislike is different than distrust. You can work with anybody as long as they are not crossing the boundaries or violating workplace rules. So identify whether you dislike a person or you distrust a person. If you distrust a person, better move away. If you dislike a person, recognize that you dislike him. And then try to bring in your mental barrier that your dislike should not percolate to the quality of work. And in this, it's important for you that comes a corollary to this. Reframe your dislike. Dislike by itself is a very unhelpful and vague term. There can be several reasons for dislike. Maybe it's a behavior, as I said earlier. It can be something the way they speak or how they deal with the people. So you have got to manage your feeling. But first you have to understand what you dislike about that person. Getting specifics would give you a chance to do something with it. It's quite possible. You might then discover that your dislike is due to disgust, distaste, resentment, or plain jealousy. Dig into your emotional reaction and you can manage it better. And in 9 out of 10 times, you would find that your dislike is because of jealousy. I once had a coworker I didn't like and I realized that he had a tendency to boast. So once I got underneath it, I realized that my feelings were because, in some ways, he could do much pretty impressive stuff, which I at first failed. And then when I realized it, I worked harder and did better than him. People who are raised to be modest, especially, Indians are always told to be humble, to be modest, not to crow about your achievements. They get more jealous. And that makes the behavior of the people who are assertive, who recognize their capabilities and talk about their capabilities, who blow their own trumpet, they resent them. So if you can reframe your behavior, maybe you can call it quirky, you can call it off-putting, but something you can work through. And this reframing, let me tell you, is a very tough job. But once you do it, well, then going on is easier. So identify why it's important to work with that person. Not only you identify that you dislike the reasons of dislike, but identify that your dislike has a secondary position. To work together successfully, get clear why the collaboration is important. For example, you maybe have been put on this high profile project together, or you may want to be seen as a team player. So use that reason to craft a purpose statement. It always helps to tie up a mission statement or a big picture of its likely impact. A purpose statement helps you build an alliance around in a shared purpose. It doesn't mean you have to be friends, no, but it helps you to get back the purpose of collaboration so that you can focus on doing the work. And this mission statement, you know what the objective is. It's not to impress that person, it's to get the job done. And the person you are working with becomes a tool in that. Second is devise a plan to go ahead. Now, when you have prepared the purpose statement, the mission statement of the person, be clear on your responsibilities as well as on the job that you are doing together. Having a common purpose can help you work together more efficiently. And it's still better. You sit down with that person, tell him that this is the purpose, this is why we are working together. Whether I like you or not, or you don't like me or not, is a material. At present, the job is that we are doing it. We are doing it together. And this is the job responsibility you have got to do. These are the deliverables by you. These are the deliverables by me. So the combined deliverables will be this. When you make things clear, the other person would also understand that you have no reason to grab. Now, what happens is when you dislike a person, the other person also knows it and he dislikes you. So when the paths are clear and you know you are going together, but your paths don't cross each other, they are parallel, then becomes easier to go forward. And then when you prepare this mission statement, give it to the other person and ask what the other person feels and thinks. It can help you share some vulnerability, such as admitting that you may be weak in project in some aspect. Chances are, and they are very strong chances, that the other person would also say feel the same way and talk about the whole thing. This conversation will humanize the other person whom you can't understand. And once you can humanize that person, the going becomes very easy and smooth. And that's the purpose of working together. That the going on should be smooth without any impediment, without any peaks and valleys. Anytime you feel that your dislike is starting to come in the job, refer to your purpose statement. Refer to it again and again. You may also want to talk to a trusted friend or your manager, your boss, to seek out their perspective in case you have some blind spots. And let's not deny that there are some blind spots. Well, here's a comment by Mr. Singh that there is a problem with the video system. Well, I appreciate your telling me, but then I may not be able to help it because it's something with a system. I'll try to get it removed after this for the next comment. Anyway, anytime you feel that dislike is starting to come in, barefoot to your purpose statement, that should be your Bible. And given the person the benefit of doubt, remember, they are trying to do the right thing and they were hired for a good purpose. Take a moment of self reflection whenever you need one. You won't get anywhere if you don't try, and you may end up with a productive working relationship. And quite possible, you may also like working together with that person without a problem. Would it not be better? So, these couple of tricks can enable you to perform better. Thank you.